Every time it bumped into something, it turned around and went the other way. Fudge liked it a lot. He likes anything that's noisy. I said, "That's a nice train." Mrs. Yarby turned to me. "Oh, I have something for you, too. Peter," I reminded her. "My name is Peter." "Yes, well, I'll go get it." Mrs. Yarby left the room again. This time she came back with a flat package. It was wrapped up too, red ribbon and all. Well, that's nice of her. She handed it to me. Fudge stopped playing with his train long enough to come over and see what I got. I took the paper off very carefully in case my mother wanted to save it, and also to show Mrs. Yarby that I'm a lot more careful about things than my brother. I'm not sure she noticed. My present turned out to be a big picture dictionary, the kind I liked when I was about 4 years old. My old one is in Fudge's bookcase now. He better pretend that he likes it. "I don't know much about big boys," Mrs. Yarby said, "so the lady at the store said a nice book would be a good idea." A nice book would have been a good idea, I thought, but a picture dictionary, that's for babies. I've had my own regular dictionary since I was 8, but I knew I had to be polite, so I said, "Thank you very much. It's just what I've always wanted." "Good job, Peter." "I'm so glad," Mrs. Yarby said. She let out a long sigh. Maybe she was anxious about giving a good gift. She let out a long sigh and sat back on the sofa. My father offered the Yarbys a drink. Good idea, Mr. Yarby said. "What'll it be?" my father asked. "What'll it be?" Mr. Yarby repeated, laughing. "What do you think, Hatcher? It'll be Juicio. That's all we ever drink. Good for your health." Mr. Yarby pounded his chest. "Of course," my father said, like he knew it all along. "Juicio for everyone." My father told my mother she went into the kitchen to get it. While my father and Mr. Yarby were discussing Juicio, Fudge disappeared. Uh-oh. Just as my mother served everyone a glass of Mr. Yarby's favorite drink, he came back. He was carrying a book, my old worn-out picture dictionary, the same one as the one the Yarbys just gave me. "See?" Fudge said, climbing up on Mrs. Yarby's lap. "See, book?" I wanted to vanish. I think my mother and father did too. "See, book!" Now Fudge held it up over his head. "I can use another one," I explained. "I really can. That old one is falling apart." I tried to laugh. "Good job, Peter." "It's returnable," Mrs. Yarby said. "It's silly to keep it if you already have one." She sounded insulted, like it was my fault she brought me something I already had. "Mine!" Fudge said. He closed the book and held it tightly against his chest. "Mine, mine, mine!" "It's the thought that counts," my mother said. "It was so nice of you to think of our boys." Then she turned to Fudge. "Put the book away now, Fudgy." "Isn't it Fudge's bedtime?" my father hinted. "Oh, yes, I think it is," my mother said, scooping up. "Say goodnight, Fudgy." "Good night, Fudgy," my brother said, waving at us. Fudge was supposed to fall asleep before we sat down to dinner, but just in case, my mother put a million little toys in his crib to keep him busy. I don't know who my mother thought she was fooling, because we all know that Fudge can climb out of his crib any old time he wants to. He stayed away until we were in the middle of our roast beef. Then he came in carrying Dribble's bowl. He walked right up to Mrs. Yarby. He thought she was his new friend. "See?" he said, holding Dribble's under her nose. "See, Dribble!" Mrs. Yarby shrieked. "Oh, I can't stand reptiles! Get that thing away from me!" Fudge looked disappointed, so he showed Dribble to Mr. Yarby. "See?" "Hatcher!" Mr. Yarby boomed. "Make him get that thing out of here!" I wonder why Mr. Yarby called my father Hatcher. Didn't he know his first name was Warren? And I didn't like the way Mr. and Mrs. Yarby both called Dribble a thing. I jumped up. "Give him to me," I told Fudge. I took Dribble and his bowl and marched him into my room. I inspected my turtle all over. He seemed all right. He didn't want to make a big scene. I didn't want to make a big scene in front of our company, but I was mad. I mean, really mad. That kid knows he's not allowed to touch my turtle. "Peter," my father called, "come and finish your dinner." When I got back to the table, I heard Mrs. Yarby say, "It must be interesting to have children. We never had any ourselves." "But if we did," Mr. Yarby told my father, "we'd teach them some manners. I'm a firm believer in old-fashioned good manners." "So are we, Howard," my father said in a weak voice. That was pretty rude of Mr. Yarby to say. He's kind of hinting that the Hatchers are not doing a good job of raising Peter and Fudge. I thought Mr. Yarby had a lot of nerve to hint that we had no manners. Didn't I pretend to like their dumb old picture dictionary? Agreed. Isn't that good manners? If that isn't good manners, then I don't know what is. My mother excused herself and carried Fudge back to my room. I guess she put him into his crib again. I hoped she told him to keep his hands off my things. We didn't hear from him again until after dessert. Just as my mother was pouring the coffee, he ran in wearing my rubber gorilla mask from last Halloween. It's a very real-looking mask. I guess that's why Mrs. Yarby screamed so loud. Ah! If she hadn't made so much noise, my mother probably wouldn't have spilled the coffee all over the floor. Oh my gosh. My father grabbed Fudge and pulled the gorilla mask off him. That's not funny, Fudge, he said. Funny! Fudge laughed. Funny, 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 Fudgy! Yes, sir, Hatcher, Mr. Yarby said. Good old-fashioned manners. By that time, I'm sure my father was sorry the Yarbys weren't staying at a hotel. Clearly, it was a bad idea. I finally got to bed at 10. Fudge was in his hand, slurping away. I thought he'd never fall asleep. I thought I'd never fall asleep, but I guess I did. I woke up once when Fudge started babbling. He said, boo bam 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 ha ba shi, whatever that means. I didn't even get scared. I whispered, shut up. And he did. Early the next morning, I felt something funny on my arm. At first, I didn't wake up. I just felt this little tickle. I thought it was part of my dream. But then I had the feeling someone was staring at me. So I opened my eyes. Fudge was standing over me, and Dribble was crawling around on my arm. I guess Fudge could tell I was about ready to kill him because he bent down and kissed me. That's what he does when my mother's angry at him. He thinks nobody can resist him when he makes himself so lovable. And a lot of the time, it works with my mother, but not with me. I jumped up, put Dribble back into his bowl, and smacked Fudgy on his backside. Hard! He hollered. My father came running into the room. He was still in his pajamas. He whispered, what's going on in here? I pointed at Fudge, and he pointed at me. My father picked up my brother and carried him off. Go back to sleep, Peter, he said. It's only 6 o'clock in the morning. I fell asleep for another hour, then woke up to an awful noise. It was Fudge playing with his new train. It woke up everybody, including the Yarbys. But this time, there was nobody they could blame. They were the ones who gave Fudge the train in the first place. Breakfast was a very quiet affair. Oh no, so awkward. Nobody had much to say. Mr. Yarby drank 2 glasses of Juicio. Then he told my father that he and Mrs. Yarby had their suitcase packed. They were leaving for a hotel as soon as breakfast was over. Good riddance. My father said he understood that the apartment was too small for so many people. My mother didn't say anything. Oh my God. When Mr. Yarby went into Fudge's bedroom to pick up a suitcase, his voice boomed, Hatcher! My father ran towards the bedroom. My mother and Mrs. Yarby followed him. I followed them. When we got there, we saw Fudge sitting on the Yarby suitcase. He had decorated it with about 100 green stamps, the kind my mother uses, the kind my mother gets at the supermarket. See? Imagine like stickers. Fudge said, see? Pretty! He laughed. Nobody else did. Then he licked the last green stamp and stuck it right in the middle of the suitcase. All gone! Fudge sang, holding up his hands. It took my mother half an hour to peel off her trading stamps and clean up the Yarby suitcase. The next week, my father came home from the office and collected all the cans of Juicio in our house. He dumped them into the garbage. My mother felt bad that my father had lost such an important account. But my father told her not to worry. Juicio wasn't selling very well at the stores. Nobody seemed to like the combination of oranges, grapefruits, pineapples, pears, and bananas. You know, Dad, I said, I only drank Juicio to be polite. I really hated it. You know something funny, Peter? My father said, I thought it was pretty bad myself.